They had been together for 17 years, and Nora had decided that Peter was too stupid to notice. Coffee every morning at 6 a.m., the same quick kiss, the same conversations about dinner. Peter trusted her completely. He was stupid, wasn't he? The changes started imperceptibly. Her phone face down during dinner. Before, it had always been face up. Late nights at work became the norm, 3 nights a week instead of once a month. Nora worked in real estate, so overtime made sense. At least that's what Peter told himself. Then came the yoga obsession. Expensive designer workout clothes that she didn't even ask his opinion about. Classes that supposedly happened at odd times, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the evening. The schedule never repeated itself once. His college sweetheart had transformed into someone unfamiliar. They used to discuss everything, but now Nora gave him reports like a weather forecast, brief, to the point, boring. Friends still called them the perfect couple. If only they knew how quiet their home had become. Peter decided to surprise her at the office one day. Maybe they could have lunch together like they used to. The assistant looked surprised when he asked about Nora. She said Nora had left around noon for a personal meeting. Strange, because that morning Nora had talked about staying late because of a big deal. That's when the puzzle pieces started falling into place. New clothes he'd never seen her wear. She was wearing them for someone else. Longer showers after work. Nora had changed her laptop password after 8 years of using their anniversary as the password. Phone calls would cut off as soon as she saw Peter. The woman who shared every detail about difficult clients suddenly went silent about work. Conference trips to cities 2 hours away. Since when did local real estate require so much travel? She joined a gym, even though they had a great one 5 minutes from home. She stopped wearing her ring to bed because it was uncomfortable. This was nonsense. Peter understood, if you work with dangerous equipment, taking off your ring makes sense. But at home, in bed? Absurd. Weekend plans always involved helping other people. Her sister needed help moving furniture, her mom with the computer, college friends were visiting. Each excuse sounded reasonable separately. But when you added them all up, a pattern emerged. A pattern that meant someone else was getting the attention that used to go to Peter. Their bedroom had become a place where 2 strangers slept side by side. Nora was always too tired for anything except a quick good night. If your wife doesn't have health problems but you're not having sex, something's wrong. If it stops completely, you have problems. Peter started paying real attention, the kind that notices details Nora considered too small. While she was playing happy family with someone else, he was learning things about his wife he never wanted to know. Attention became his full-time job. The lies about staying late were just the beginning. Peter started writing everything down. What time she left when she promised to return, what she wore when leaving, and after returning. Little things that cheaters think go unnoticed. Her yoga schedule made no sense. Different days every week, different times completely random. Peter found the studio online. The real schedule bore no resemblance to what she told him. The classes Nora supposedly attended didn't even exist. He spent an entire evening cross-referencing her calendar with the studio's posted schedule. Tuesday at 7 p.m., no class existed. Thursday morning at 6, the studio didn't even open until 8. Saturday afternoon at 3, the only class happening was advanced hot yoga for members who'd been practicing for years. Nora had never mentioned anything about hot yoga, and she certainly wasn't advanced. Peter created a spreadsheet. In one column, he listed every time Nora said she had yoga. In another, he documented what classes actually existed at those times. Out of 15 claimed sessions over the past month, only 2 aligned with real classes. And even those 2 were questionable because Nora had attended neither. Peter had called the studio pretending to ask if his wife had signed up for the membership renewal, and the receptionist politely informed him that no one by that name was in their system. The deception was meticulous. Nora had clearly planned this carefully, choosing times that seemed plausible, varying the schedule enough that it appeared organic. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed Peter would never verify her story. Following your own wife, the most pathetic thing a man can do. But Peter sat in his car near the shopping center, waiting to see where Nora really went after yoga. She drove into the parking lot. 10 minutes later, another car appeared. A man got out and sat in the passenger seat of Nora's car. Peter drove closer. What he saw enraged him beyond measure. An intimate conversation. Nora's characteristic gesture, playing with her hair. The same laugh she used to give Peter. After an hour, the man got out, but first leaned in for a long kiss. The kind of kiss that leaves no doubt about the nature of a relationship. Peter watched as they separated slowly, reluctantly. The man's hand lingered on Nora's face, his thumb stroking her cheek in a gesture of familiarity that made Peter's stomach turn. This wasn't a new relationship. This was something that had been going on for a while, something comfortable and established. When the man finally pulled away and walked back to his car, Peter noticed other details. The way he moved suggested confidence, someone who felt secure in this arrangement. He didn't look around nervously or rush. He took his time, even pausing to look back at Nora's car before getting into his own vehicle. Nora sat in her car for another 10 minutes after he left. Peter could see her checking her reflection in the rear-view mirror, fixing her hair, reapplying lipstick. She was composing herself, transforming back into the wife who would walk through their door later and tell him about her wonderful yoga session. This wasn't a yoga instructor. 17 years of marriage, and she was kissing another man. The betrayal was real. His wife was a cheater. Game over. Peter drove home in a fog. Nora arrived 15 minutes later, telling him what a wonderful yoga class it was, how relaxed she felt, how the instructor really pushed the group today. Every word was a lie, spoken with perfect sincerity. She went into elaborate detail about poses she'd supposedly held, about the meditation at the end, about how her hamstrings were getting more flexible. She even complained about another student who apparently talked too much during the quiet portions. The level of fabrication was impressive in its thoroughness. Peter didn't react, just asked about dinner. Some would have jumped out of the car and made a scene immediately. But he knew emotions shouldn't dictate actions. Emotions lead to trouble. While Nora was in the shower, her phone lay on the kitchen table. Password protected, but Peter could see the message preview on the screen. A text from someone saved as colleague. Strange, Nora had mentioned this colleague maybe twice in 5 years. And now this person was texting at 9 p.m. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again. Today was amazing." Peter's jaw clenched. The casualness of it, the assumption of privacy, the intimacy implied in those few words, it all pointed to something well established. Peter started tracking when these messages from colleague came in. Always at moments when Nora seemed happiest. Always before she went to take a long shower. Too convenient a coincidence. Over the next week, Peter noticed a pattern. The messages arrived like clockwork after her supposed yoga sessions. Sometimes they came late at night. Once a message arrived at 2 in the morning, and Peter watched as Nora, who he thought was asleep beside him, quietly picked up her phone, read it, smiled, and typed a response before setting it back down. She'd been awake. She'd been waiting for that message. And she'd responded to another man while lying in bed next to her husband. The investigation began that night. While Nora was in the shower, Peter decided to search her car. She always left it unlocked in the driveway, too trusting. Nothing in the glove compartment except documents. Nothing under the seats. But in the door pocket, under a stack of real estate flyers, was a receipt. A gas station purchased 2 weeks ago. The timestamp showed 11:30 a.m. Nora had said she was showing houses all that day, but this gas station was 40 minutes in the opposite direction from any of her properties. Peter pulled out his phone and checked the location. The gas station was in a residential area on the other side of town, nowhere near any of the commercial or residential zones where Nora typically worked. He mapped the route from their house to the gas station. It would have taken her nearly 50 minutes in mid-morning traffic. What property viewing would require her to drive that far out of her usual territory? Peter went through her work calendar for that day. She'd listed 3 showings, all in the downtown area, all within a 5-mile radius of her office. There was no legitimate reason for her to be at that gas station. Unless she was meeting someone. Unless that gas station was a convenient midpoint or near his house. Peter photographed the receipt and put it back exactly where he'd found it. He continued searching. In the center console, beneath loose change and old receipts, he found a small bottle of perfume, not the brand Nora wore. It was expensive, something she might give as a gift. Or something another woman might have left behind. No, that didn't make sense. Peter examined it more closely. It was definitely perfume Nora could wear, but not her usual scent. A different fragrance for a different version of herself. The next morning, Nora left for work at 8:15. Peter called his boss Sebastian around 9, said he was sick. Sebastian heard something in his voice, asked if everything was okay at home. Peter told him more than he planned, about the suspicions, about what he saw yesterday, about the need to find out the truth. Sebastian was silent for a minute. Then he shared that his ex-wife had done the same thing years ago. Supposedly classes that didn't exist. Late nights that turned into something else. He ignored the signs until it was too late. Lost half of everything in the divorce. Sebastian's story was eerily similar. His ex-wife had claimed to be taking painting classes at a community center. For 6 months, she'd go twice a week, coming home with stories about watercolors and acrylics, about the retired art teacher who ran the sessions, about the other students and their varying skill levels. The truth came out by accident. Sebastian had run into the community center director at a grocery store and mentioned how much his wife enjoyed the painting classes. The director looked confused. They hadn't offered painting classes in over a year due to budget cuts. His ex-wife had been spending those evenings with a co-worker. By the time Sebastian discovered the truth, they'd been together for nearly a year. She'd gotten sloppy toward the end, comfortable in her deception, certain she wouldn't get caught. The divorce had been brutal. She tried to claim she deserved more because Sebastian worked too much, didn't pay enough attention to her, drove her into another man's arms. The judge hadn't been sympathetic. His advice was simple. Get evidence before she knows you know. Document everything. And he meant everything. Because when cheaters realize they've been caught, they get desperate. And desperate people do stupid things. They'll empty bank accounts, Sebastian warned. They'll hide assets, claim things belong to them that don't, lie to lawyers and judges. I've seen it happen. My ex tried to say I'd been abusive, that she feared for her safety. All lies, but it dragged the proceedings out for months. If I hadn't had documentation proving where I was, what I'd done, it could have been much worse. Take this day, Sebastian said. Take a week if you need to, but find your answers. Peter thanked him and got down to real investigation. 2 days later, an opportunity arose. Nora announced another yoga class. This time Peter was ready. He left earlier and positioned himself near the gas station. At 2:10, Nora's car pulled into the gas station. She didn't fill up, just sat for 5 minutes, then drove to a residential area behind it. Peter followed at a distance. She parked in front of a house. The same car from the other day was in the driveway, the same model, the same small dent in the rear bumper. This was her lover's house. Peter parked at the end of the street. Around noon, the front door opened. A man came out to check the mailbox, 40 to 45 years old, tall, wedding ring clearly visible. The same man from the parking lot. Peter took photos of the house, the address, the car. He zoomed in on the license plate, made sure the address number was clearly visible in the frame. He photographed the street sign at the corner. He even took pictures of the surrounding houses to establish context, to prove this was a residential neighborhood, not some commercial property Nora could claim to be showing. The man walked back inside and Peter waited. He'd brought a thermos of coffee and a book, prepared to stay as long as necessary. If anyone asked, he was waiting for a friend, reading while he killed time. 3 hours passed. Peter's back ached from sitting in the car, but he didn't move. At 3:45, the front door opened again. Nora emerged, followed by the man. They stood on the porch talking for several minutes. Even from a distance, Peter could see the body language, the way she leaned into him, the way his hand rested on her lower back, the way they looked at each other. Then another kiss, longer than the one in the parking lot. Peter photographed it all. When they finally separated, Nora walked to her car. She sat inside for a moment, checking her appearance again, before starting the engine and driving away. Peter didn't follow her this time. Instead, he waited until the man went back inside, then drove past the house slowly, memorizing every detail. A well-maintained 2-story colonial, professionally landscaped yard, a children's swing, set visible in the backyard. This man had a family. He was destroying his family for an affair, just like Nora was destroying theirs. Now he knew everything he needed. Where they met, when they met, proof of systematic betrayal. Sebastian was right. You need to get evidence before Nora finds out. Peter started building his case. First thought, a lawyer. He called 3 different divorce attorneys that day. They all said the same thing. Document everything, make copies of financial documents, start transferring money to accounts she doesn't have access to. And whatever you do, don't let her know you know. Because when cheaters realize they've been caught, they start hiding assets. The first attorney, a woman named Victoria Hughes, was particularly blunt. I've handled hundreds of these cases, she said. The spouse who acts first, who secures their finances first, who documents everything first, that's the spouse who comes out ahead. Not because the system is unfair, but because cheaters panic. They do stupid things. They withdraw money, they hide jewelry, they forge signatures. Document everything now, while she still thinks she's safe. The second attorney, Bernard Walsh, emphasized the importance of digital evidence. Take screenshots of everything. If you can access phone records, do it. If you can document her location through any means, credit card receipts, GPS data, whatever, do it. Judges see a lot of he said, she said. What they respect is hard evidence with timestamps and locations. The third attorney, James Kirkland, was younger but came highly recommended. Here's what most people don't realize, he explained. Infidelity doesn't always matter in divorce proceedings, depending on your state. But it matters in terms of leverage. When you can prove systematic deception, when you can show that marital funds were used to support an affair, that changes things. That's when judges start looking at asset division differently. That's when alimony becomes unlikely. So yes, gather everything. Make it ironclad. The next few days became a balancing act, acting normal at home while secretly preparing for divorce. Peter opened a new account at a different bank, started transferring small amounts every few days. Nothing large enough to show up in their joint statements. Made copies of every financial document. He went through their file cabinet methodically. Tax returns from the past 7 years. Investment statements. Retirement account documentation. The deed to the house. The titles to both cars. Insurance policies. He photographed everything, saved the digital copies to a cloud account Nora didn't know existed, and made physical copies that he stored in a safety deposit box at the new bank. Peter also started tracking their spending. He noticed that Nora had been using cash more frequently in recent months. She'd always preferred credit cards for the points, but suddenly she was withdrawing $200 here, $300 there. When he asked about it casually, she claimed she needed cash for tips to contractors, for small purchases at client meetings, for parking meters. All plausible explanations. All probably lies. He found a private investigator who specialized in infidelity investigations. Hired him for a week for $2,000 to get professional evidence on top of what he already had. Photos that would hold up in court. Documentation that no judge would ignore. The investigator's name was Frank Morrison, a former police detective who'd gone private after 25 years on the force. Frank's office was a small, neat space above a coffee shop downtown. His walls were covered with certifications and commendations from his law enforcement days. "I've been doing this for 12 years now," Frank said during their initial meeting. "And I can tell you right now, you're doing this the right way. Most people come to me emotional, angry, ready to explode. You're calm. You're methodical. That's going to serve you well." Peter showed Frank everything he'd collected so far, the photos from the parking lot and the house, the receipts, the yoga schedule discrepancies, the pattern of late-night texts. Frank nodded, taking notes. "This is good," Frank said. "This is really good. But what you need is documentation that establishes a pattern beyond doubt. I'll follow her for a week. I'll document every movement, every meeting, every interaction. I'll get video footage, time-stamped photos, license plate records. When I'm done, you'll have a case file that leaves no room for doubt or denial. One thing I need to tell you," Frank added. "Sometimes what I find is worse than what the client suspected. Sometimes it's better, maybe it's just an emotional affair, maybe they haven't crossed certain lines. Are you prepared for whatever I might discover?" Peter didn't hesitate. "I need to know the truth, whatever it is." Nora continued going to fake yoga, continued lying about where she'd been, continued acting like the perfect wife while Peter systematically documented her affair and financially protected himself. She thought she was untouchable. But now she would learn that cheaters always get caught. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. The private investigator delivered his report Friday morning. A week of surveillance yielded a gold mine of evidence. Photos of Nora entering his house multiple times, timestamps showing she stayed for hours, shots of their goodbye kisses on the porch, video footage of her leaving the house looking disheveled. Professional documentation that would destroy her in court. $2,000 well spent. Frank's report was thorough and devastating. It included a minute-by-minute timeline of Nora's activities over 7 days. Monday, left work at 2:15 p.m., drove to target residence, arrived 2:47 p.m., remained inside for 3 hours and 12 minutes, departed at 5:59 p.m. Wednesday, left work at 11:30 a.m., met subject at restaurant, lunch lasted 90 minutes, including extended time in parking lot, then followed subject to residence, remained 2 hours and 40 minutes. The photos were damning. Frank had captured Nora and the man through windows, embracing in what appeared to be a living room, sitting close together on a couch, cooking together in the kitchen, like a domestic couple. He'd photographed their arrivals and departures, documented every kiss, every touch, every intimate moment they thought was private. The video footage was even worse. Frank had used a high-quality camera with zoom capabilities. The clips showed Nora laughing, relaxed, happier than Peter had seen her in months. She looked like a woman in love, comfortable and content, with someone else. The investigator also discovered what Peter didn't know. Nora's lover was married, had 2 teenage children. His wife Rachel worked as a teacher at the local school. She also had no idea about her husband's infidelity. The affair was destroying 2 families. Frank had done his homework on the other man too. His name was Eric Hartley, 43 years old, worked in pharmaceutical sales. Married for 19 years to Rachel Hartley, who taught 10th grade English at the public high school. 2 children, a 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. By all appearances, a normal suburban family. I drove past his house when I knew he'd be at work, Frank explained. Watched the wife leave for school, saw the kids waiting for the bus. They have no idea. The wife's car has teacher parking stickers and bumper stickers supporting the high school drama program. The daughter has a college visit schedule posted on social media. These are real people whose lives are about to implode. Frank paused, then added, I always tell my clients, what you do with this information about the other family is up to you. Some people want revenge on everyone involved. Some people just want to end their own marriage and move on. There's no right answer. But that wife, those kids, they're victims too, just like you. Peter made an appointment with a divorce attorney that day. Brought all the evidence he'd collected. The lawyer smiled when he saw the documentation. This was the kind of evidence that ended divorces quickly. He drew up the papers that same day. Victoria Hughes reviewed everything with an expression of grim satisfaction. This is exactly what I was talking about, she said, flipping through Frank's report. This isn't circumstantial. This isn't guesswork. This is proof of ongoing, systematic infidelity. And look here, she pointed to several receipts Frank had documented. She's been using joint funds for hotel rooms, for expensive lunches, for gifts. That's dissipation of marital assets. That works heavily in your favor. She began outlining the strategy. We'll file for divorce, citing adultery. We'll request that she be responsible for her own legal fees. We'll argue against any alimony given the circumstances. We'll push for a division of assets that reflects her misuse of marital funds. And if she tries to fight it, we have enough evidence to make it very uncomfortable for her. There's one more thing, Victoria said. You mentioned she works in real estate. A scandal like this, especially if it becomes public, could damage her professionally. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't make it public. That's your choice. But be aware that how you handle the confrontation will determine whether this stays private or becomes known to her colleagues and clients. Peter had already made his decision on that front, but he wasn't finished yet. The confrontation had to be perfect. He decided to serve her the papers at the office, in front of colleagues, in front of the boss. Let everyone see who she really was. Peter waited until Wednesday. Nora had a yoga class scheduled for that day, but this time he wouldn't let her get there. At 2 p.m., Peter walked into the real estate office, asked the receptionist if he could see his wife, said he had important documents. The receptionist called Nora. His wife came out of the office looking puzzled. Why was he here? What was so urgent? Peter handed her the envelope in front of everyone, divorce papers with a detailed list of her romantic activities, dates, times, locations, everything. The lobby had about 8 people in it, 3 other agents, 2 clients waiting for appointments, the receptionist, and an administrative assistant. All eyes turned to watch the scene unfold. Nora's eyes widened as she read the first page. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The entire office fell silent. Everyone was staring at Nora. Her secret was out. The first page was a standard divorce petition, but attached to it was an exhibit list. Exhibit A, timeline of subject's infidelity. Exhibit B, photographic evidence of encounters. Exhibit C, financial records showing misuse of marital funds. Exhibit D, video documentation. The list went on for 2 pages. She tried to pull him aside, whispered that they needed to discuss this at home. But Peter was done protecting her reputation. He said loud enough for everyone to hear. He knew everything. The fake yoga, the hours at his house, the private investigator's documentation showed it all. There was no yoga, Peter said, his voice steady and clear. There was never any yoga. For past 4 months, you've been spending your afternoons with Eric Hartley at his house on Meadowbrook Drive. I have photos. I have videos. I have a week's worth of professional surveillance that documents everything. Colleagues stared in shock. The woman they thought they knew was a complete fraud. Nora tried to explain, begged to discuss it at home, said she never wanted it to go this far. But everyone in the office now knew the truth. The confident real estate agent who seemed so organized turned out to be just another cheater. One of the agents, a woman named Patricia who'd worked with Nora for years, actually gasped audibly. A client who'd been waiting for his appointment quietly got up and left. Apparently he'd rather reschedule than be present for this drama. The receptionist stared at her computer screen, clearly wishing she could disappear. Nora's face had gone from pale to red. "Peter, please," she whispered urgently. "Not here. Let's go outside. Let's talk about this somewhere private." But Peter had planned this moment carefully. "You made the choice to lie to me every day for months. You made the choice to use our money for your affair. You made the choice to destroy our marriage. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are." The broker immediately called her into his office. She came out 10 minutes later destroyed. Peter didn't stay to watch. He delivered the papers, made his statement, and left. As he walked to his car, he felt a strange mixture of emotions: anger, satisfaction, sadness, relief. 17 years of marriage ending in a real estate office lobby. It wasn't how he'd imagined his life going, but Nora had written this script, not him. That evening, Nora came home to find her things already packed. She was a bit angry, but Peter didn't care. He was in a furious state. Said his lawyer would be in touch. The woman who thought she was untouchable had just lost everything. Marriage, reputation, half the assets. All because she underestimated the husband she betrayed. At the divorce hearing, Nora got hammered. Received no alimony. It turned out she had used part of his hard-earned money for the affair. Got only 30% of their joint savings. The house had no equity, so she got nothing from there. Had to pay back an additional $1,900 because they established she had used that amount for the affair. The hearing took place 6 weeks after Peter served the papers. Nora had hired an attorney, a man named Gregory Fields, who specialized in defending difficult cases. He tried to argue that the marriage had been troubled long before the affair, that Peter had been emotionally distant, that Nora deserved an equal division of assets regardless of infidelity. Victoria Hughes demolished those arguments methodically. She presented the evidence of Nora's affair, the photos, the videos, the timeline. She presented financial records showing that Nora had spent nearly $4,000 of joint funds on hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts for Eric. She presented testimony from Frank Morrison, the private investigator, who described his surveillance in professional, unemotional terms. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen countless divorce cases, listened to everything with an impassive expression. When Nora's attorney tried to claim emotional neglect, the judge cut him off. "Counselor," she said, "emotional issues in a marriage don't justify infidelity, nor do they justify the misuse of marital funds. Your client conducted a sustained, systematic affair over a period of at least 4 months, possibly longer. She used joint financial resources to support that affair. She lied repeatedly to her spouse about her whereabouts and activities. The evidence presented here is overwhelming and undisputed." The judge's ruling was harsh but fair. No alimony. Nora was employed and had proven herself capable of supporting her own extramarital activities. Asset division of 70-30 in Peter's favor, with Nora required to reimburse the marital estate for documented affair-related expenses. She was awarded her personal belongings, her car, and a limited selection of furniture. Nora was stupid and got exactly what she deserved. On top of that, she was only allowed to take a few pieces of furniture, clothes, and her car. Peter doesn't know what happened to Eric, Nora's lover, but he sent all the information from the private investigator to his wife Rachel. 3 days after the office confrontation, Peter had mailed a copy of Frank's complete report to Rachel Hartley. He included a brief note: "Your husband has been having an affair with my wife. I thought you deserved to know the truth. All my evidence is enclosed. I'm sorry you have to find out this way." He never heard back from Rachel, but through mutual acquaintances, Peter eventually learned that she'd kicked Eric out immediately. The divorce proceedings in that household were apparently even uglier than Peter's. Rachel had the sympathy of the community, the support of her school, and the outrage of 2 teenage children who felt betrayed by their father. Peter lives in Virginia. After the divorce hearing, he hasn't heard from his ex-wife at all. Hiring the private investigator was the right decision. He could get closer, do more, spend more time gathering evidence. And one more thing. Why does everyone call every man a wimp when he doesn't act fast enough? What would you do if you were married for 17 years? You have everything intertwined after so many years together. Are you saying you'd throw everything away very quickly and get divorced? It doesn't work that way in real life. The men who share these stories and don't rush gathering evidence, those who come out winners. Why? First, they preserve their freedom. They don't resort to violence because they don't let emotions control their actions. So stop calling every man a wimp because he doesn't move fast enough. The weeks following the divorce were strange for Peter. He had lived with Nora for so long that the empty house felt alien. Every corner reminded him of what used to be, of the life they had built together. But those memories were tainted now, poisoned by her betrayal. He couldn't look at their wedding photos without wondering when it had all started to fall apart. Peter threw himself into work. Sebastian had been incredibly supportive, giving him the flexibility to handle the divorce proceedings while maintaining his performance at the company. His colleagues noticed the change in him. He was quieter, more focused, less likely to join them for after-work drinks. But they also saw determination in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The financial hit from the divorce was significant, but Peter had protected himself well. Thanks to Sebastian's advice and the evidence he'd gathered, the settlement had been heavily in his favor. Nora's infidelity and misuse of their joint funds had worked against her spectacularly. The judge had not been sympathetic to a woman who had systematically deceived her husband while spending their money on an affair. Peter started going to the gym regularly. Not the one Nora had joined. He couldn't stomach the thought of running into her there, but a different one across town. Exercise became his therapy, a way to channel the rage and hurt that still bubbled beneath the surface. He lost weight, gained muscle, and found that physical exhaustion helped him sleep at night. His friends rallied around him once they learned the truth. Some had suspected something was off with Nora toward the end, though they'd never voiced their concerns. They organized guys' nights, invited him to barbecues, made sure he wasn't isolated. Peter appreciated their efforts, even when he didn't feel like socializing. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Peter ran into one of Nora's former colleagues at a coffee shop. The woman, whose name he couldn't quite remember, approached him hesitantly. She apologized for what had happened and mentioned that Nora no longer worked at the real estate agency. The scandal had been too much. Her reputation in the local real estate community was destroyed. No one wanted to work with someone who had so publicly betrayed their spouse and lied to everyone around them. Peter felt a grim satisfaction hearing this. He hadn't actively sought to destroy Nora's career, but he wasn't sorry it had happened either. Actions had consequences, and she was living with hers. The colleague also mentioned something else. Nora had apparently tried to make the relationship with Eric work after everything came out. But Rachel, Eric's wife, had kicked him out immediately upon receiving the evidence Peter had sent. Eric had lost his family, and from what the colleague had heard, he blamed Nora for ruining his life. The affair that had seemed so exciting and worth the risk had crumbled under the weight of reality. Apparently, Eric and Nora had tried to build something from the wreckage of their marriages. They'd moved in together briefly, attempting to prove that their relationship was real, that it had been worth destroying 2 families. But the foundation was rotten. Their affair had thrived on secrecy and excitement, on stolen moments and forbidden passion. When it became their everyday reality, when they had to deal with judgmental stares and whispered conversations and the genuine consequences of their actions, the shine wore off quickly. The colleague had heard they'd lasted less than 3 months living together before Eric moved out. He'd apparently wanted to try reconciling with Rachel, not because he loved her, but because he missed his children and the comfortable life he'd thrown away. Rachel had refused to even speak to him. Their divorce had been finalized, and she was reportedly dating someone new, a fellow teacher who actually respected his marriage vows. Peter didn't know whether to laugh or feel vindicated. These 2 people had destroyed their families for what? A few stolen hours and the thrill of deception? Now they were both alone, facing the consequences of their choices. As Peter walked home that day, he realized something important. He was starting to feel okay. Not happy, not yet, but okay. The raw wound of betrayal was beginning to scar over. He could think about the future without it being overshadowed by the past. He started dating casually about 6 months after the divorce. Nothing serious, just dinner here and there, getting to know new people. It felt strange at first. He hadn't been on a first date in nearly 2 decades. But also felt freeing. These women didn't know his history, didn't see him as the betrayed husband. They saw him as Peter, a successful man in his early 40s with his life together. One woman, Jennifer, stood out. She was a marketing executive, divorced herself about 3 years prior. They met at a professional networking event and hit it off immediately. Jennifer was straightforward and honest, qualities Peter had come to value above almost everything else. She didn't play games, didn't hide her phone, didn't make excuses about where she was going. Their relationship developed slowly. Peter was cautious, and Jennifer understood why when he eventually told her about Nora. She shared her own story of betrayal. Her ex-husband had gambled away their savings and lied about it for years. They bonded over their shared experience of having their trust shattered and their determination not to let it define them forever. A year after the divorce, Peter sold the house. He couldn't live there anymore. Every room held memories he wanted to leave behind. He bought a modern condo downtown, closer to work, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open floor plan. It was his space, decorated according to his taste, filled with his things. No ghosts of a failed marriage haunted these walls. Sebastian continued to be a mentor and friend. Over lunch one day, he told Peter he was proud of how he'd handled everything. Many men, Sebastian said, would have let their anger consume them, would have done something stupid and ended up in jail or worse. But Peter had kept his head, gathered evidence, and let the legal system work. He'd protected himself financially and emotionally, and now he was building a new life. Peter occasionally wondered what Nora was doing, where she ended up, but he never looked her up, never tried to find out. That chapter of his life was closed, and he had no desire to reopen it. She had made her choices, and he had made his. They were no longer connected, no longer relevant to each other's lives. The private investigator, Frank Morrison, reached out about a year after the case. He wanted to use Peter's case as an example in his marketing materials, with identifying details changed, of course. Peter agreed. If his experience could help other people facing similar situations, then something good would come from all the pain. Frank told him that infidelity cases had become a bigger part of his business in recent years. Social media and smartphones made it easier for people to cheat, but they also made it easier to catch them. He said Peter had been one of the smarter clients, someone who controlled his emotions and let the evidence speak for itself. Most people who come to me are ready to explode, Frank explained. They want to confront immediately, make a scene, force a confession. I have to talk them down, convince them that evidence is more valuable than confrontation. You understood that instinctively. You played the long game, and it paid off. Peter's relationship with Jennifer grew stronger. She met his friends, he met hers. They took trips together, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, built something real and honest. Peter found himself trusting again, slowly but surely. Jennifer's transparency helped. She was an open book, never gave him reason to doubt her. 2 years after the divorce, Peter proposed to Jennifer. Not because he was trying to replace what he'd lost with Nora, but because he'd found something better. A partnership based on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine affection. Jennifer said yes. They had a small wedding, just close friends and family. Sebastian was there, beaming with pride. Peter's parents, who had been devastated by the divorce and Nora's betrayal, welcomed Jennifer warmly. She fit into his life seamlessly, and more importantly, she made him happy. On his wedding day, as Peter stood at the altar waiting for Jennifer, he reflected on how far he'd come. 3 years ago, he'd been sitting in his car, watching his wife kiss another man, his world falling apart. Now he was about to marry a woman who valued him, who would never betray him, who saw their relationship as something precious to protect. The pain of Nora's betrayal would always be part of his story, but no longer defined him. He had taken that experience and used it to become stronger, wiser, more discerning. He'd learned that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, but only with someone worthy of it. As Jennifer walked down the aisle, radiant in her simple white dress, Peter felt something he hadn't felt in years, pure, uncomplicated joy. This was what love was supposed to be. Not lies and deception, not secret meetings and fake yoga classes, but 2 people choosing each other every day with full honesty and commitment. The reception was filled with laughter and celebration. Peter's friends gave toasts, sharing stories of his resilience and character. Sebastian's toast was particularly moving. He spoke about second chances, about rising from the ashes, about the strength it takes to trust again after being burned. I've known Peter for 15 years, Sebastian said, raising his glass. I've seen him at his best and at his worst. What impresses me most is not that he survived betrayal, but how he survived it. He didn't become bitter. He didn't let it destroy him. He took the time to heal, to learn, to grow. And now he's found someone who deserves him. To Peter and Jennifer, may your marriage be everything a marriage should be. The guests applauded, and Peter felt Jennifer squeeze his hand. She leaned over and whispered, "I promise I'll never give you reason to doubt me." Peter smiled. "I know. That's why I married you." Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new, interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.